My name is Bertha Chandler, and I've worked for the last 20 months as the Fulbright Librarian at the Second Air Division Memorial. It's involved all kinds of different things, really. A chance to select books for the collection, a chance to work with the archive material as it's donated to the collection, both written documents and things like pieces of uniforms and helmets, escape kits, navigation charts. It's been a chance to be the American presence in the library and to share with people who come in with questions information about America, information about the Americans who were in Norwich and East Anglia during the war. And it's been a marvelous opportunity as well to go out into the community, not just in Norwich, but out beyond Norwich to some of the villages as well, and talk to people about the memorial, and again about the Americans who were stationed in that area during the war.
How did you happen to get involved with this library?
I had worked as the director of the Sharon, Massachusetts Public Library for 6 years, and I was doing some guest lecturing at Simmons College at the Graduate Library Science program. I was a little bored with still being in Sharon, so I said to the faculty there, find me something exciting. And Jim Matarazzo, one of the associate deans, came in and said, here's something you should apply for. It was the Fulbright program application to be the librarian at the Second Air Division Memorial Library. So I applied.
What were your first impressions of the library?
It's almost hard to remember, quite honestly. It's been so long, even though it hasn't been that long. I think upon arriving, I was impressed by the people that I met initially who were associated with the library, the people on the library staff, their feelings of interest and pride both in what they had within their library, and certainly tremendously impressed by the usage that that library was receiving by the people of Norwich. I was impressed by the variety of the collection as well, the kind of books that were there, from quilting and books, recipes about the cookery in the States, to politics and government, to biographies, to the fairly good sized collection of material on World War II and on the Second Air Division. And I think at the same time I had concerns because I could see things that we could do a bit differently. Perhaps a way to organize things a bit differently. Perhaps a way to entice people in, to let them know what was there. So I saw something that was very unusual and very special, and something that was very much a challenge as well.
What are the unique features of the library?
First off, that it is a memorial at the same time that it is a library. I don't know of any other library, if you will, that is also a memorial and is very much a living memorial, because it moves all the time. It reaches out to new and different people and to new generations as well. Unique also because it helps to keep history alive, and that's very important. History for the Americans who were stationed in that area during the war, and history for Americans of my generation, history for future generations as well. Unique certainly as well because it fosters an understanding between two countries that perhaps think they speak the same language but don't, two countries that have strong ties over a number of years but have an ongoing need to work at those ties if they are to remain strong.
Tell us about the outreach program that you are involved in.
The major outreach program had to do with giving talks. And in the last 20 months, I've given over 80 talks to a variety of groups and organizations, talks to school groups. I think that's been one of the most important areas of talks, anywhere from groups like the village school at Seething, where in one room there were youngsters from 6 or 7 years old up to 12 or 14 years old. Talks to the old Hall School in Heatherset, or talks to some of the, what we would call private schools and the English call public schools in some of the outlying communities. And also talks to students who came into the memorial because they had teachers who said, yes, I'd like my class to learn something about American government and politics, or yes, I'd like my class to learn a bit about American history. I'd like to bring them in so they can see what's there. Talks to all kinds of adult groups as well. Rotary clubs beyond number, women's institutes and town women's guilds, the tourist information center guides so that they'd know a bit about the memorial and perhaps would bring visitors that they're showing Norwich to into the memorial. The volunteers group at the museum in Norwich.
What is the reception of the English people to this American collection?
The reception is one of interest and fascination and warmth. There is a tremendous interest, more than I had ever comprehended, among English people about the United States, what we are what we are, why we do what we do. They use the collection heavily to try to find answers to those questions.
Is this at any particular level more than any other level, age level?
I think it goes across ages, quite honestly. There are youngsters who are 10, 12, 14 years old who come in, many of them with a particular interest in the history. Maybe they have an interest in cinema in the States, so they want to read about it. The interests certainly change as the age levels change. But on up through, people who are working, on up to people who have retired, are curious still about the States.
How have the Americans reacted to the library?
When you say the Americans, do you mean members of the Second Air Division?
Both Americans, Second Air Division, as well as other Americans.
I sense, as we have Second Air Division members and other Americans coming in, that there is, if they know about the library, a great deal of pride that there is a collection like that and a memorial like that in England, in Norwich. And if it's something that's new to them, because people do come in who don't realize that that collection is there, a fascination and a curiosity, and then again, a pride that there is something that's a bit different and unique there.
To what degree are historians now using the archives of the library?
There is, I think, a growing usage of those archives by historians. We have had in the last year and a half a woman who is writing a social history of the Americans in East Anglia, who's come in and listened to the oral histories, come in and read through some of the diaries, also used the directories to make contact with some of the members of the association here in the States. We get some fascinating phone calls from the BBC, anything from requests for a documentary they were doing on Americans in England during the Second World War, in particular looking for information about black troops in England during the war. And we also have had, within the last 6 months, a call from a London theatre group doing a production. They wanted information on what V-mail actually would have looked like so that their props would be correct. We get correspondence from around the world, sometimes people who are, again, researching books. Recently, a gentleman who is doing research on plane crashes that happened on the continent and feeding information back to our collection. So it's definitely a growing usage by researchers, and an exciting one.
What's the future of the library?
I hope that it will be a very exciting, vital, long-term future. Certainly the trust that has been set up and the income that now exists from the funds held by that trust assure that there will be new books, new magazines, and new audiovisual material in the collection on a regular basis. There is, I feel, a very great need to continue to have people working with the trust in the library, people whose main focus is the memorial room itself and its collections, both an English presence and an American presence, because it's the two together in their ideas and their approaches that reflect the friendships that started this collection in the first place, and that I think will be so important in the future if the friendships and understandings that started 40 years ago are to continue. I am enthusiastic, hopeful that the Second Air Division Association will undertake the fundraising that they've been asked to, so that there will be a continuing American presence there, and a British presence as well.
What should the world and history know about the 2nd Air Division and World War II?
There's so much that they should know. I'm not a historian. I wish I were, to be able to grasp everything. They need to know the military history, the history of the planes, the history of the raids, the history of the individual bomb group bases and how they were established. They also need to know the social history, the interactions that happened between the Americans who came to East Anglia and the English people who were living there. And they need to know, beyond the Second World War, how that social history has continued and grown. If I might use Mr. Jordan Utah's expression, that there is indeed the greatest love story that is not told existing there.
What single experience stands out in your mind during the last 20 months that you've been there that epitomizes all that the memorial room stands for, whether it be meaning for you or meaning for the rest of the world?
How can I find one experience that epitomizes the meaning that's there? I'm not sure that I can pick on just one experience. I think what happens with people in that room is, to me, one of the most important parts of it. What happens when there are Americans who are visiting and they're talking about what they remember, and someone who's English walks by and hears those accents and stops to talk because they too remember and they want to share those memories. The melding together of the countries that happens because that memorial is there and is the kind of memorial that it is. Certainly that carries on into perhaps people who aren't talking but are reading the books and using the material. But the people, to my mind, are the most important aspect of it. This shows an aerial view of the 2nd Air Division Memorial Room as it is now. It shows how the room has been opened up with the divider taken out and the new book shelving placed in the room. This is the new case for the 2nd Air Division Roll of Honor. Above it is the message sent by President Kennedy for the dedication of the memorial room 25 years ago. This is the view of the memorial room which users have as they first walk into it. On the right-hand side is the key to the room, which has been designed out of English oak and American black walnut to show again the special relationship and friendship that the room epitomizes between the two countries. On its large flat surface, the key will have an aerial map of Norfolk and Suffolk. Imposed over that will be the locations of the bases of the 2nd Air Division and an explanation of the bomb group numbers for each of those bases. As people stand behind that key looking at the map, they will then look up and see the tail fin symbols of the bomb groups. This shows how we're using the new shelving in the memorial room to display new books that are added to the collection. As people walk by, this front-out display catches their attention and stops them. This shows part of the new work area and study carrel that have been added to the room. It gives a place for staff who are working in the room, as the gentleman might be who's standing on the left. It also provides quiet study space for someone who's coming in to view some of the video cassettes in the collection or listen to some of the audio tapes.
Tell us about some of the visitors that come to the library.
We have a growing number of people who are coming to visit. In May of this year, we had 75 individuals and a group of about 80 people from the 3rd SAD at Wotton. In June, up to the 17th of June, we'd had 91 individuals and another group of about 75 from the 392nd at Wendling. They come from all across the United States, as they came from all across the United States in the 40s. The visitor's book shows locations like White Plains, New York, Portage, Wisconsin, Wheat Ridge, Connecticut, Seabrook, Texas, and Oswego, Illinois. They leave with us a variety of comments, and I'd quote you just a few from the visitor's book. Many memories, a living tribute, it's great. My last visit was 44 years ago. A nice connection between English-speaking countries, a beautiful place. We're also seeing a growing number of comments which I think are very special. For example, from Louisville, Colorado, I was glad to be able to see where my dad was. From Ephrata, Washington, I'm the nephew of a technical sergeant of the 492nd. From Akron, Ohio, I'm a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Air Force. My dad was in the 467th. And from London, I'm the daughter of a second lieutenant of the 93rd. Thank you.